Since the morning, we have heard various aspects of the problem, that is, declining interest in science education and research among students. President Kalam attempted to tell us about some of these extraordinary figures of Indian origin who've done something remarkable. He also pointed out, why is it that science education or careers in science are not found attractive? Because they don't pay as much money, or they don't have a professional label to it, like what Dr. Mohan pointed out as well, quite explicitly, the various kinds of reasons behind why science as a career has progressively become less and less attractive, largely because of economic, sociological reasons and so on. Now, this cannot be. If this were to happen, I think as a nation, I think we'll be in for disaster. Remember, between the time 1939 to 1945, as many as 90 countries out of the 200 countries in the world suddenly became independent. They were all under colonial empires, various kinds, invariably all European. And after the war, 90 countries became independent and free for themselves. What are these? There's just one single country that actually adopted the policy of science for national development. India. Look around. It's important, I think, to applaud this. I think it's also important for us to think back and see what started as a fantastic ideal for national development, how it has been given the go-by during these 65 years. What is it that has happened? I think that's important. You cannot blame the parents because the parents want the best for their children. So it's important then that we also need to worry about how is it that we make a career in science attractive. Various suggestions were made. Maybe we ought to have a science cadre. Like you have an IAS and an IPS, you will now have an ISS. Is that the solution? Would that be the right kind of a solution we need to think about? Or will they also become bureaucratic, non-performing, just the way administrative services or finance services are? Because the moment government puts up some kind of a system, chances are the system may or may not work very well. And that's something that will be important for us to think in terms of. So we've got to own the problem. We've got to find our own solutions for the problem. We need to find and see what the history is, what the sociology has been. The history and sociology have been eminently talked about already. I don't need to go into that. The reasons behind why science as a career is not attractive is because you don't see an end point trying to see, is this something that's going to feed my children, my grandchildren, and so on. Quite appropriate in terms of parental demands for their children and so on. But then, science is not always Subramanian. Science is not always G. N. Ramachandran or C.V. Raman or so on. Science is an act. Science is a culture. Science is a questioning mind. Science also is a process by which you think logically. You do not have to have a degree. We have had, during the last 65 years, 3 science policy resolutions in this country. One was in the early 50s, later on about 30 years later, and the most recent was the one that was declared in January in Calcutta. Suddenly some new aspect has come in this last one. That is now no longer called a science and technology policy. It's called science, technology, and innovation. I think it's an important point. Because innovation does not need a PhD degree. Innovation does not require a B.Tech or whatever. Innovation is something that is in everyday life. You look at a problem, you find a solution. A child does that. A villager does that. Perhaps the most outstanding example of such an innovation is the missed call. Who invented the missed call? Just look at that. It required a technology, it required an invention. Without this, there was no missed call, right? Whoever invented or innovated this idea had understood that there is something that is possible in that machine which I can now very effectively use for my purpose. That I think is an idea of an innovation. There's an outstanding man, a professor in the School of Management in Ahmedabad. His name is Dr. Anil Gupta. What he has done, he has collected as many as 850 scientific experiments that have actually worked. What is a scientific experiment? It's one where there is a problem facing you. It's not why the sky is red or blue or yellow. It is not whether necessarily the sun will disappear beyond the Chandra limit. But it is, I got a problem and I need to find a solution from existing methods of logic. Dr. Bhargava talked about astrology isn't going to help. If I were to therefore think maybe I should do for Shani Bhagavan, it's not going to work. It is not going to work. That's important. Because you need to use logic. You need to use existing methods, try and see if you can apply them, or even look at newer ways of applying by innovating on them. This I think is important. Professor Anil Gupta has collected such 850. I'll give you one example. That gentleman should have got a PhD in my opinion. Very elderly, 75-year-old man, this side of Akhand Ganga in Patna. His wife, his Janeman, is on the other side. Now he doesn't know how to go. All he has got is a bicycle. And the man looks around and he says, there is this fellow who's actually got a bicycle tube, not a tire, the tube. I need a thicker, wider one. So maybe I should go for a motor car tube. I'll put one such inflated balloon on the right side, inflated on the left side, and I'm going to bicycle my way across the Ganga. He did it. Is this any less in terms of scientific feat than what I have done in looking at the structure of crystalline molecules in the lens? Think about it. That's because what is being done here is a scientific method. Scientific method produced a solution for an immediate problem, just like the missing call has done. One after the other, Dr. Anil Gupta puts together just close to 1,000, and this is called the honeybee network. You can go on the web, look at that, and you will marvel at the ingenuity, the scientific success stories of a very large number of people. We are here assembled on behalf of Balasubramanian University and the AP Academy of Sciences. And Vigyan Prasad, of course. Yes. If you therefore were to build a situation, I agree, we got problems. Many of these problems are just stark against our faces. More often than not, we give up rather than think in terms of what can be done. The problem is so huge. Solutions are not all that difficult either. It cannot be a solution that, one-shot solution that really comes out and lets you convert everybody who is now 10 plus 2 towards the science. It has to be incremental. It has to be sociologically acceptable. It's one where also the entire family involves itself in this. Look at how a family involves itself in a growing child. Between the age of 1 month to about 5 years, the child is a darling of the house. Anything that the child does is a scientific experiment. It's attempting to do. How do I crawl? How do I eat? What happens when I have my teeth? How do I get up and walk? How do I talk? Everyone becomes a matter of great excitement, joy for the family. Can we not extend it further? Then what you are doing is actually you are building scientists. You are building scientists even in the classroom. You are building scientists outside the classroom. And you are building scientists in spite of the classroom, which I think is important. How do we therefore produce an atmosphere, an infrastructure, a methodology, and a social culture that will actually make every one of our students do a little bit of scientific experiment by himself? True, mobile science labs are very important. Science experimentation by having musea and so on are important. But I think if we were to then put together periodically, week after week, month after month, challenges of this kind. I did one. When my children went to a school in Hyderabad, a remarkable school, an expensive school, a school that did not have examinations at all and so on. It was a new experimental school. The children, of course, were pretty bright, and as you would expect, since they come from the higher income family and so on, they are doing very well. The experiment was, outside that school was a little boy who was a cobbler's assistant. All he had was just a little thing, and he would actually mark out of rubber a beautiful sole for the shoe. So I called these children from Vidyaranya. Can you do it? Okay? It was at once a challenge, it was also an insult. Not as much of an insult for the child as for the parents. But if you were to do this, you do two things. One, the first time in your life you're actually doing an experiment that was not in the textbook, yet was a challenge, because here was somebody who was doing it, who was a nobody who was doing it, and I'm not able to do that and so on. And the second, to whatever extent I did, my God, I succeeded in doing it. There is a level of satisfaction. This particular aspect of science, even if I fail in the experiment, I have done something by myself. That I think is a level of satisfaction that you never get in any other aspect. Where an experiment is attempted, even if it fails, I'll go again and do it again and so on. It is the spirit. I think it's this kind of a thing that can be awakened in each one of the students. Schools won't do it, because schools are too busy. The teachers are too busy. The teachers also, perhaps many of them don't even care. But here is the Andhra Pradesh Academy of Sciences. Here is Vigyan Prasad. We conduct summer schools. We conduct summer camps and so on. These are one-off. They're not sufficient. These are ones that must go on continuously over the period of the year, month after month. Many of us who watch, I've turned out now, thanks to Kaun Banega Karodpati, an ardent fan of Amitabh Bachchan. I didn't care for him. But you look at the way with which he was interacting with each one of the contestants. He was friendly. Whether he was right or wrong, whether he was true or just put on a show, he showed that he cared. And each one of us watched the program because we were interested in finding out of the four which one is right. Right? This is a very simple, silly, but a useful experiment. Can we have such Kaun Banega Karodpati type quizzes? Out in CCMB, two of my colleagues and I actually did, just for the hell of it. Years ago, I think about 20-25 years ago, we had 50 experiments that you can make out of an egg. It's not in the textbook. It is not in the syllabus. But if you were to challenge children to something of this kind, you will automatically make them scientifically inclined. You will not make all of them scientists. You do not wish to make all of them scientists either. What you wish to do is inculcate that scientific temper in them. That I will use logic, I'll attempt logic to address a problem, and I'll try and see if I can find a solution. That, I think, will be one of the automatic remedies that you're talking about, where the declining interest in science education is not necessarily, in fact, probably not at all among the students. I think it is more among the faculty, the school system, the college system, and the social system. And therefore, to put that together as in science education research among students is probably a misnomer. It's probably also not giving students their true right. It's probably more to do with the non-students than the students. So my recommendation, therefore, is to actually brainwash these children. You do them by such very interesting experiments. Do the experiments, it doesn't require laboratories. I'm not the only one who suggested this. There are several people who have done this, each in their own little way. I was part, while I was still teaching in a university, was part of a remarkable system in Madhya Pradesh, in a small place called Bankura, near the Narmada river right there. It was called Kishore Bharati. There will be no textbook, exactly like what Dr. Bhargava talked about, learning science part 1, all the way up to, we went, I think, all the way up to the 10th class and so on. Now, there was no textbook. People who had PhDs in physics, PhDs in molecular biology and so on, assembled together, said we will try and see how we can look at the school education system, at least in that part of Madhya Pradesh, and see how we can contribute to it. So it's called Kishore Bharati. One of the things there was, there are no lab. It's a village, and in a village, all you have is just remarkable children, and probably a bored teacher. And we said, what we will try and do, we will ask them, what's the length of this entire stage? Kaise karogi? Kitna lambai hai? Okay, 15 answers. Somebody said 2 gaj, somebody said 15 gaj, and so on. Do an experiment. Where do you go for a foot rule? So what will be your unit? What will be your scale? ISA standards and so on. One little child came and said, "Ye postcard hai na jo aata hai." I didn't think of it. Anil Sadgopal didn't think of it. It was a little kid from the village who thought of it. Okay, he was the scientist. He was the innovator. And he was the one who then said, well, I'm going to try and do this thing. What about weights? Same. Chawanni le lijiye. A 4.5 piece is a standard weight. Okay. These are things the children know. The schoolmaster doesn't use them. So that if you want to inculcate science, interest in science, make even mini, micro, nano scientists out of these little children, start right away at the age where you think is more comfortable. And get them going on programs one after the other. Periodic programs. Maybe ask them to, maybe even attract them with little prizes and things of that kind. But have it on that regular basis. This is what film world does. Okay. The film world just gets you day in and day out. This is what Dove hair tonic does all the time. I did not even know. It's a falsity that I can nourish a dead hair. What nonsense is it? Scientifically, is it valid? And yet there are people who go and buy, oh yeah, my hair is split, I now need to nourish it and so on. We buy it. The child will tell you it's not true. And yet we buy it. Using that cream over and over again will neither make you fair nor lovely. You're just as lovely as you have been before. Okay, you're just cleaner, that's all. And yet, Why do they succeed? They succeed because the advertising there goes on day in and day out. They just blow you to pieces with those advertisements. We have to use such methods. You don't use such methods, we're not going to win over. I think this is important. So I think there's one lesson that we can take off is among the remedies, I think we ought to be using from the simplest to the most difficult. If you bring a Nobel Prize winner, for the student, the Nobel Prize winner is no different from Amitabh Bachchan or Sachin Tendulkar. He is a celebrity. He has got himself a wonderful Nobel Prize. And Nobel Prize is very important because it's the highest prize ever given in science. No longer the highest prize, but certainly the most coveted prize until recently. So you look at him with awe. You don't even ask a question because you're scared to ask a question. You don't scare children by bringing a Nobel Prize winner. You can bring the Nobel Prize winner to a college or to a university system where people are at least willing to ask a question. Because if you bring a Nobel Prize winner to a high school class and say, this is the man who showed somatic cell nuclear hybridization, what are you going to do? But if the Nobel Prize winner is sufficiently good in science popularization, he will win your heart. We need to choose such celebrities. I think this is why I think it's important that we even choose people who go to visit schools and colleges and so on. Because ultimately, what is the end game? The end game is find remedies. There is no one remedy. There are multiple remedies because there is not one problem, there are multiple problems. All of which get on into taking people away, interested students away from science. So we need to look at that. And one way of doing that, I think, is to cultivate the scientific temper. And it's not a one-off job, it is not a one-semester job. It's a grinding job, it has to be done. It has to be done day in and day out. And it can be done only by attracting students, by attracting them in a variety of ways. And one easy way of attracting is to actually offer them prizes or at least sabash and so on. So that kind of an appreciation will get us quite far. In addition to this, there are already time-tested methods by which one can actually inculcate further remedies, increase the interest in science and so on. And for at least those of us who have enough wherewithals and so on, there are websites that are remarkable. And I want to suggest for you a self-help website that actually makes you score yourself and then see how far you can go. One of them is called the Khan Academy. I want you to look at that. It's an open source, freely available website, Khan Academy, KhanAcademy, KhanAcademy.com. Just go and say KhanAcademy.com history. And you ask a question. Okay, who was Alexander? And then you answer that question. Then you ask another question. In other words, it's a self-quiz situation. By the time you know it, you've already gone to 8th class standards. And just like mathematics is a teaser, everybody likes mathematics to the extent that they know and then they want to push a little further. Like that, the Khan Academy does, it takes you further and further to an extent that the Khan Academy is now used in many schools in the US. By the way, the school system in the US is not any better. The best school system in the entire world, surprisingly, is in Finland, a small country that we had known only for Nokia. Outstanding school system. And it's also available on the net. If you have a look at what does a 5-year-old learn? What does a 10-year-old learn? What is the science content? What's the economics content? What's sociology content and so on? I think it's important that we look at that. I think it's important we look at that even outside the school system. Because As it stands today, unless there is a major revolution that comes on to the existing school system, we're not going to succeed. So we have to act in spite of the school system. Of course we have to act on the school system, I'm not saying no. Individually, on behalf of various laboratories and interest groups, academies and so on, this kind of a thing, by the slide, is also very important, as much as by the regular method. These are very important things that we should quite seriously consider. I can turn the table further by saying we can talk about declining interest in Telugu literature among students, reasons and remedies, or Sanskrit, or English. How many of our PhD students can write their own research papers? Be honest, tell me. Really, it's a colossal scandal. Solutions are available. You can even try and learn. There are even courses that are given in scientific English and so on. Okay. During my time, we had to learn scientific German and scientific Russian or French and so on in universities in the US. But I think we may have to even think in scientific English and so on. The reason I'm pointing this out is because we are now, as Osmania University in AP Academy of Sciences, concentrating on science education. But the trouble or the pathology is everywhere, not just in science alone, in literature, language, okay, in geography, sociology. I think we need to, it's absolutely imperative that we do something about it. And the way you do about this is both by the regular methods and by such on-the-slide methods. I think it's a very important that we try and do that. Get back to innovation. Innovation is different from invention. Invention is a product that never existed before. It came out because of the application of scientific methods. More often than not, it's a technological product. It doesn't have to be a technological product, but more often than not, it's a technological product. It is not a difficult thing to do. Much against what many of the people who talked about since all morning, I think the solution actually is easy. It's easy, it has to be put together. It requires people coming together, coming out with a series of such challenges. Challenges that address a given age group. And then also not only challenge them, but also award them a reward. I think it should be possible to do that. India Idol, Little India Idol, Sarigamapa and all this. Okay, look at how much the children and so on go through unnatural, perhaps unhealthy, pushed by the parents. And what do? They do Bollywood dance. Is this what you want? Is this the kind of future India that you're looking for? Please think about it. On the other hand, even if we were to have, let us say, 30-second, 10-second clips between ads, between the ad that talks about my broken hair and so on, you also think in terms of one little thing that matters, the kind that BBC used to have. You're also teaching science on the slide. Teaching means I need to appreciate something. Unless what you teach is appreciated and acted upon, it's useless. It does not serve its purpose. So I think ways of doing that is by challenging the people as well, and such challenges will happen if you were to actually put together a series of programs. I would even say monthly programs across Andhra Pradesh. It's not an immediate solution. It's a long haul. It will take several years to do this thing. But the mood, I think, today is right. Just the mood in 1947 was right. When Nehru could stand up and declare that science and science alone. He used that word. Okay. And he also said these are the modern day temples of India. Right? Jairam Ramesh says there are more temples than toilets. He is being criticized. Is he wrong? Aren't there more temples than toilets in India? 57% of Indian population does not have toilet facilities. And the 43% that does still goes on the streets and opens the fly. How can you do this? Can we think about it? Is it scientific? Can we stop them? What you therefore need is not just a solution for here is a problem in science, it is a sociological problem. You need to change the mindset. One sure way of changing mind, there are only two sure ways of changing mindsets. One is by faith or religion, and the other is by science. And they are exactly the opposite sides of each other. And I would rather choose science because it's more logical. Science will turn sociological wheels. That's important. And I think if we do that, we need not, 20 years from now, have a similar, worrying situation and so on. Thank you.